Buildings are considered to affect the way we feel, think, and behave, and one cannot underestimate the role of architects in this regard. Architecture is also sometimes referred to as archiculture. In fact, some people say that it is the dimension of our society and the reflection of such. But is it really so? Dear ladies and gentlemen, the guest of our program today will help us understand the world of architecture much more better. I am really glad to introduce you Professor Hussein Sadri, the eminent critic in the field of architecture, the researcher, the social activist, and also the associate professor at Girne American University's Department of Architecture. Professor Sadri, we're really very glad to welcome you in our program today.
Thank you very much. I'm very glad to. Thank you for inviting me.
You are welcome, Professor Sadri. We know that your PhD dissertation was entitled as Architecture and Human Rights, and you are really shedding light upon very important questions, such as, for example, the relation of architects towards the humanity, their responsibilities, and also this intersection between architecture and human rights. So we are really interested to know your vision of architecture, first of all. Could you share, please, that with us?
Of course. Thank you. I think to understand architecture better, I would prefer first to make a differentiation between architecture and making habitats. Mm-hmm. You know, like all other animals, human beings also needs kind of habitats to live, to produce food, to find, drinkable water, and all other resources. But architecture is not only this. Architecture is a form of a craft and then later a profession that made by the power system actually that is ruling the society. So it is part of establishing the society and the society's structure, and it is something more than creating a habitat for a human being. So it's something more than the natural process of habitat making of human being. And it includes the power relations. For this reason, my point of view in architecture is we have to bring architecture back to the level of dealing with habitat issues. Because today, architecture is trying to create some financial profits, for example, some social and political control mechanisms, more than dealing with water of the people, food of the people, the clean environment of the people, or healthy life of the people. These are something that habitat must deal with it. And for that reason, first of all, I want to have this differentiation between these two, and to say that my point of view is we have to find ways that we can bring the field of architecture more in the field of habitat making, more dealing with not only the physical spaces, but also the other needs of human beings, which are food, the clean air, the water, clean water, and accessible water. And these are actually the main issues that I'm dealing in the last 15 years. My PhD was also related to this. In the PhD, I was more dealing with the human issues and the human needs, and of course its relation with human rights. And later on, I'm also trying to understand the ecological part and the relation between cities, architecture, and food production, water, and the other things.
What about that you mentioned about professional ethics in architecture, which you also cover in your works, right? What about that concept of eco-architecture, and can you elaborate a little bit more about how do you really see that concept of eco-architecture and eco-culture?
Yeah, as I said, I do believe that whatever it is architecture is not purely dealing with human beings' needs. Because when it is architecture, it is some professional field it is done by people who are educated in the universities and schools of architecture, are members of the architectural societies, and their main concerns are their profession. And because this profession in last 400, 500 years, especially in the Western culture, is developed in a way that only deals with buildings, not anything else.
Constructions themselves.
So when we are talking about eco-architecture, we are talking about buildings that are more eco-friendly, not anything more. For this reason, I'm against eco-architecture. I do believe that eco-architecture is not enough. It's okay, it's good, but it's not enough. Because imagine, when you build a building in a place that there is not enough drinkable water there, or you put it in a kind of density that the water resources of the city is not enough to support it, or you do not deal with the water resources under the ground, because eco-architecture deals with only collecting of the rainwater, which is very important, very good, but is not discussing more than it. Is not dealing with the upper scale conditions. Any building has a lot of footprints, like all other products. Any building has water footprint, energy footprint, ecological footprints, carbon footprints. So we have to deal with all of this. But if we will be only thinking in the scale of building and not see the wider perspective, the holistic perspective, then always a lot of things will be missed there.
What about the modern trends in architecture? Has there something been invented in order to meet that holistic picture of architecture, to meet not only the ecological approach of our society, but also maybe the human needs?
One of the main, let's say, developments in the field of habitat design is the invention of the idea of permaculture design, I think. So it has around 40 years old history now. So it is developed in Australia. So this field, the permaculture design, for example, is not only dealing with the buildings, but also dealing with the soil, dealing with the water resources, dealing with the food production systems, dealing very, very importantly with the societal organizational design. Because, for example, if you are going to live in a community that is designed for consumption purposes, whatever you design which will be kind of eco-friendly will not be really, resulted in a positive results. So the structure of the society also needs kind of change, needs kind of design, which permaculture is dealing with these issues to make these habitats in a way that will raise the solidarity and cooperation between people, not the competition. Will make the habitat in a way that human and nature will work together, a kind of cooperation and partnership between human being and the wildlife. So this can be, I think, one of the most radical transitions in the field of habitat design, which bring a new perspective, a new field of study and field of knowledge that really challenge the modern and Western understanding of architecture.
That is very interesting concept, I think, about the harmony between the human being and the human architecture and the nature. And referring to that, I would like to ask you maybe more personal question about would you like to live in such a society where permaculture exists? So how do you really see the, let's say, the dream house of yourself?
Yeah, it's a very difficult question because there are two issues. I do believe that kind of salvation is not possible to be individual, first of all. So for this reason, I would not prefer to, to go towards my personal dreams, which at the end, while a lot of people in the world are suffering from the hunger, I would not really like to have a dreamable, life. Let's say. I don't know how to express it, but I hope this idea of permaculture, or ideas similar to this, which we are now working in our courses as well and our research topics. I hope these will make our world in a long term a world that we can have better life for everybody and for the planet as well, because the planet is our house. If the planet will be healthy, we will also have the healthy life. If not, it's not possible actually.
Exactly.
So my dream is more than personal dream. It's kind of a dream for humanity and our planet. And I do believe that if we, for example, we learn to use our local resources for our life, to not bring something from China, something from Africa, we can reduce our consumption, we can reduce our needs, and we can maximize our design skills to design everything in a way that will be recyclable, will be reusable, will be decompostable. What we produce at the end will go back to the nature and will feed the nature, will make better future for the nature and for the future generations. Then, as all of us, not only me, but all the human beings and plus all the living beings in the nature, we will all have the better life altogether.
Yeah, will benefit from such living. I think it is really such a vision of the dream house that actually all the human beings need to have to really to consider our planet as our house, right?
Yeah.
And to have that ecological approach to all the aspects of our living. And I guess also, since you are an associate professor at Girne American University's Department of Architecture, we know that you have had the design studio this semester, and it was called De-Urban Design Studio. So can you share, please, with our dearest Cyprus Observer audience as well, what does design studio actually mean for us, for people who are not really dealt with architecture a lot?
We have in the core curriculum of architecture, we have a design studio in the fourth year, which deals with urban design studio. And what we did, we just add a D and E before the urban design studio, and we changed it to the urban design studio. So the idea comes from the theories of social ecology, which says there is a huge difference between urbanization and city. Urbanization is a mass production of a consumer society. This is something after industrial revolution, a post-industrial revolution concept that creates a mass populations, mass buildings, a mass products and a mass consumption systems that transforms even the rural areas to kind of urbanized societies. So these urbanized societies are societies that they buy all their needs from supermarkets, or they order it from these online selling companies, for example. And instead of that, in the opposite side. Cities, traditionally, the difference between cities and rurals also come from this, were the places that a big number of people could come together, produce culture, produce art, produce science, which, I mean, in the villages were not really, you know, that much prior, let's say, but the cities of the past were the places that, because of the energy of the thousands of people coming together and supporting each other with the kind of organization of life, they could produce more cultural, scientific, you know, products as well. But so from this difference, we think that cities are very, very important bones of human life, human society's life, and they need a kind of recovery. So now we have a sick structure which needs a kind of recovery. We need to get rid of urbanization and support city life. Support cities that could have more fair societal structures, could be independently controlled by its inhabitants, could be self-sufficient, produce whatever they need in their own society, and could be off-grid, because the off-grid means that, you know, there will not be any need for water network, electricity network, you know.
All right,
So they can live without these networks, because these networks will not let these cities to have a resilient life. They will be always dependent to some source of energy coming from outside. So this is a kind of dream society. And now with the knowledge that we have today, with this permaculture knowledge, we can produce, for example, food forests that after 20 years they will reach to their mature conditions, and with minimum energy coming from outside. I mean, minimum time that a person is, I mean, going to put in that forest, a human being or the people. They can run their life and they can produce foods, you know, like all the forest. There is no gardener in the forest, so permaculture teach us how to create such a system that will be always in the balance and works like forest. And so at the end will be very, very easily possible to solve human needs more easily with rehabilitating the environment and fixing all the harms that we made in the nature. We'll let all the rivers again be fertile, and, you know, all the soils and all the, and then deal with only with cultural issues, deal with science, deal with innovations. You know, this is a kind of dreaming society that we are thinking about it. And I made it very long, but in the studio we try to design this transition. So I will explain.
And did your students deal with Cyprus? Did they envisage how can Cyprus be changed in reference to these de-urbanization programs?
Yeah, in the studio we did firstly, in the first step we did a project, a dreaming project. So this is the vision project, what stage we have to reach. And then we designed the transition. So from now to there, how we have to design this transition. So we made it for 30 years actually. Because we believe that whatever today we are doing here, it has the effects all around the world. Today we are sitting here, but at the same time we are sitting in all the planet, because I mean both benefiting from the resources of other parts of the world is part of it, but also if we create a kind of pollution, it will affect also the other parts of the world. So for this reason, we try to show these effects in the world, and we choose cities from very diverse geographies with very, very diverse conditions. We choose one city from Cyprus, Nicosia, because we needed one place in Cyprus that we can visit. We are more familiar with it. So will make more sense. But we choose, for example, Manhattan City in New York as well, as a kind of heart of today's world, let's say. And then we choose one slum area in Nairobi, Kenya, which is one of the biggest slums areas in the world, Kibera. We choose a city, a post-war city of Raqqa in Syria, which, today it's more in the agenda, and, people are discussing about it. So we could have very diversity of problems that actually they are the same problems, They are very diverse, but the source of these problems is the same. This is our philosophical understanding of life, which is based on consumption, which is based on consuming all the resources of future generations from the earth to just, create a kind of happiness, which is a fake happiness, which is not real actually. Kind of goals that are fake goals. When you reach to that goal, you realize that this is not actually what you were, dreaming. So all your life you try to buy a car, and because of this you create huge roads in your cities, and then when you bought the car, you sit to drive it. You realize because of the traffic jam, because of the pollution, you have a lot of, but you lost all your life. So this mentality, which creates all the wars, which creates all the hunger, which creates all the pollutions in the world, all the lack of resources, this is the main problem. And it shows itself in Raqqa in another way, in Manhattan in another way. But we try to understand it and to see actually how we can make the transition for all of these cities to reach to that ideal situation.
Do you think that architects in this sense need to be optimistic? Because I think, as you have just mentioned, that a person can make a difference in the world, right? And if we implement some interesting strategies, some interesting society structures as well, we can affect our planet in general as well. And vice versa, if we create some pollutions, that will affect our planet as well. But do you think that architects really need that positive approach, that buildings can make a difference in the world, or architects can make it?
Yeah, I think, I always give this example that I do believe that unfortunately we are now too late to solve the problems. Because of this climate change, the pollution's amount, now it comes to me, and I mean, it is what I'm reading from the other scientists' reports. It comes to me that solving these problems and, reaching to this dreaming society is impossible almost. But it is like a person who has cancer. We know that he is going to die. Even if we know that, even if we are sure that he is going to die or she is going to die. Now our responsibility is to make her happy, to make her to live as much as possible, to extend her lifespan, to reduce her pains. These are our responsibilities. So whatever now we have to do in the world, even if we don't have any hope, to solve the problems must be related to reducing the pains of the people, the pains of the nature. Reduce maximize the lifespan. So extend the life, make it as much as possible. So of course it is possible, because any decision, you know, like you want to buy a tomato for your breakfast, you know, even this much is small and sometimes, you know, seen a kind of unnecessary, you know, this important decision can change the world, because there you can decide what will be the main criteria of buying a tomato. Are you going to buy a tomato which looks bigger and more red, or are you going to buy a tomato that it is produced by your neighbor? Or
the community.
You are going to tell that because tomatoes needs too much water, without tomato also I can live, you know? So this is another decision to do. So any of these decisions, if you take, you will make different kind of effects in the world. So this is the same for architects. The sensitivities that they have to develop related to their works while they are doing with soil. I have a very interesting example about this soil issue. There is a huge master, his Japanese master, his name is Fukuoka, and he says that even, you know, 1 centimeter of the soil must not be replaced, because soil has a very strong infrastructure with its biological, you know, diversity and the fungi structures under it, you know, and the insects and all these, you know, millions of creatures living there. So we don't have right to, touch it and intervene.
Yeah.
And this is a kind of sensitive mindset. And now imagine, to build a building, sometimes dozers enters to a land and change all the topography. So this is the lack of the sensitivity, to not understand what is soil, because in none of the architectural schools in the world there is not such a course called soil. None of architecture students or architects or architecture professors, not now, let's say, not really a lot of them, knows that soil means microorganisms. You know? They see soils as a kind of physical material.
Yeah.
But soil means microorganism, and we don't have such a knowledge. So these are the sensitivities that we have to develop. And this must come to the architectural education also today. Today we have to bring courses related to ecology, related to learning human life, human needs, related to food production, related to water, how water behaves. We don't know how water behaves. Water is chemically, its chemical structure and also physical structure is one of the materials that have very different behaviors than all other
very mysterious
materials. And we have to learn it because we are dealing with it.
Yeah. And how in this sense architects can, what is the way to build the buildings, for example, to construct the buildings, if not to affect the soil and to, with that minimum negative impact to the environment?
So first of all, the place of the building is very, very important. You cannot build buildings everywhere. It must very, very sensitively must observed and evaluated. The way that it receives sun, the wind, the water resources. So the topography of the city or the geography that you are going to build anything for your life, and also the wildlife and its habitats and its needs. These all must be first taken into attention. So the location is very, very important. So the choosing of the location, which makes your life, because you are going to live there.
Yeah.
So one of the main problems today in our societies is that the houses are not built for living of people. The houses are built as kind of investments for creating a financial, source for people. So for this reason, people are not buying houses to live. They are buying houses because this is the best investment.
To sell to someone else.
To sell to someone else, to rent to someone else, And when you move to some house, you are not thinking that 5 generations you are going to live there, like it was previously. You are thinking, okay, I'm buying this house, I will live 2 years. If I don't like it, I will buy another house, I will change this part, This is the mentality today. So it is a very kind of short-term mentality again in this sense. So we have to change it to the long-term perspective, and this long-term, I mean more than 10 generations maybe, not build something that will stay only for one family's lifespan, which doesn't have any meaning, because even the birds, even all the other animals, when they build something, they want the other generations also will use it. You don't do something only for yourself.
Of course.
This is very, very egocentric. So we have to change this, and then if we have this long-term mindset, then we will learn. We will learn where to build that in a long term will be stable, and how to deal with the other community members, how to structure that community, because human is not an individual living animal. Human is a kind of animal that knows how to cooperate, and for this reason, and needs friends, needs these partnerships. So for this reason, this is also part of the design, part of the decisions. And then related to materials and all others, of course, the local materials, the maximum benefits from nature. And
I think very wisely mentioned by Professor Sadri just now that long-term approach to our own houses, of course, induces more conscious approach to architecture and design as well. One more question about your future plans. We know that, as far as we know, you are going to visit. Well, you have just mentioned about the difference between cities and urbanism, right? But to my mind, New York is one of the most urban cities in the world. And you will be making the project there, as we know, about current urbanization problems. So can you tell more about this project, please?
Yeah. In an academic environment, there is a term called sabbatical. So this is coming from Shabbat, actually, that there is a day that you are not working. So sabbatical is in some institutes is happening every 3 years, every 5 years, or every 7 years. So this is now our 7.5 years that's finished. So we decided to have a kind of sabbatical and try to update ourselves, our knowledge, and for this reason we applied for some research grants, and luckily we could receive some, and we are going to spend a semester in City College of New York, City University of New York, and our plan is to deal with, first of all, the most recent urbanization and urban design issues, and I mean the developments in the universities, how it affects the curriculums of the universities as well. There are such interesting and very innovative master programs today in the New York City. New York City is one of the leading cities in terms of innovative educational programs today in the world. And at the same time, it is the center that United Nations is there, you know. There are a lot of big universities, centers for modern arts, and of course cultural centers, parallel to the financial centers and, you know, all the others. And also, very interestingly, New York City is the place for very leading activist movements, and at the same time the city itself and the communities in the city, the people in the city, recently developed a lot of interesting projects on reappropriating some lands and creating some commons, creating some communal gardens, you know, everywhere in the city. So there are a lot of interesting and a kind of new sources for us to update ourselves. There we are going to work with one of the very important professors of this field, and kind of NGO that is there, and an urban design master program in the university. So we hope that it will be beneficial for us, and then later we can share the fruits of this with our students and with our colleagues after coming back.
That's great, and I think that architects have a kind of maybe different perception of the cities and towns. As an architect, how do you perceive New York, like an architectural picture of that city?
You know, the main issue there is it is full of contradictions. So this is very, very interesting for me, because at the same time it has one of the biggest and the most natural parks in the world. You know, which more than a park, it's a kind of forest, you know, and amazing environment for social life as well, and also for amazing habitat for wildlife. And at the same time, it is one of the most dense concrete cities in the world, you know. So on one hand, it is the center for financial and, you know, this the industrial development, today's industry, I mean this financial industries, and on the other hand, it is a center for activists and, you know, these Occupy movements, and, you know, United Nations is there, so this is another energy in the city. And it is there, very interestingly, there are a lot of projects related to the future of New York City. So the center that we are going to work with them, they have a project related to demotorizing the city, so leaving all the motorized vehicles outside of the Manhattan city and make all the streets green and use a light rail. So this kind of futuristic projects, that this project is also introduced to the city council, that gives another opportunity to see, I mean, what these cities and the structures in these cities, the municipalities there, what they are thinking about the future. Yesterday, actually, I read a news which was very, very interesting. The municipality of New York sue the biggest petroleum companies in the world, like British Petroleum, like Shell, you know, related to the pollution that they are dealing in New York City. And the municipality of New York today is saying that if I have to solve the air pollution problem of New Yorkers, and I have to spend this much of money, the originators of this problem, which are the petroleum companies, they have to pay it to me. And yesterday I read in the newspaper that they opened the court, the municipality in New York. This is very interesting because, you know, imagine a municipality today in such a city has this mindset. So what is our conditions? You know, this visiting the other place make us to wake up again and, you know, to understand our situation. Few days ago, I will, if you don't mind, I will share this with you as well. In one of the cities in Cyprus, there was a meeting and I was there, and they were talking about light rail possibility in the future and the cost of making the light rail. And I asked one question from the mayor, and I said, what is the cost of not making light rail? And they shocked. They said, what do you mean? Not making it doesn't have a cost. I said, no, it has a cost. The cost of not making the light rail is the maintenance of the asphalt roads that you have. If you don't make light rail, you have to maintenance your roads. If you don't make light rail, your number of the cars will be increased in the future. You will have traffic jam. You have to widen your roads. You have to demolish some houses, make the roads wider, make new roads, make, you know, new car parking areas. You have to, these are the costs of not making light rail. Have you ever calculated this? No. The only thing that you are calculating, or the only thing that we are calculating here, is the cost of the correct strategies that we are going to do. So when we are calculating only this part, it's becoming very costly for us. And we are saying, okay, we don't have money, we will not do it. And later, we have to spend more money than that to solve the problems of not making it. So this is our problem. In all stages.
That's really how the innovative approach can help people cut the expenses which they do in their everyday life. And I think, dear Cyprus Observer audience, dear viewers, we have just heard on behalf of Professor Sadri very interesting positive news about New York and about the decisions that they make in their municipality. If you have some positive news about ecology trends, about what's happening in the world in terms of architecture and city strategies, or some important decisions are being really undertaken on behalf of different municipalities, please share in comments, and I think we will be also glad to know your vision of our situation of the planet. And I think such projects as you will do in New York, they really maybe enrich with the knowledge and also with certain hope in the better future possible for humanity, right? Since such projects are held in such cities. Dear Professor Sadri, a lot of thanks for such a fruitful discussion which was held today. We really wish you a lot of success in your trip to New York, and we of course will be waiting for your back in Cyprus. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear Cyprus Observer viewers, go global, living local, and stay with Cyprus Observer. That was our Friday program with an honorable guest, Professor Hossein Sadri today. Thank you for watching us.